Are we ready to get going then? Lori,
Yep.
tell me, yeah?
Go ahead.
All right, well, Lori and Jennifer, thank you so much for the opportunity here, and good morning to all the smiling faces at 9 a.m. on this beautiful, beautiful Zoom morning. How many people here, this is going to be awkward because, we're not in person, but just raise your right hand. How many people here have actually taken this course before, Opportunities in Short Sales with us? Oh, now that we just did that, I can't see anybody raising their hand.
Oh, sorry. Let me see if I can.
No, it's good. It's good. Just plug away in the chat. You guys feel free to do a chat. If you don't want to barge in with vocals, feel free just to open up the chat and just type your question in. And once in a while, when the other speaker is speaking, we can just jump in there and go through some questions. We appreciate you guys being here, and ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to jump in. I know a couple of you. Angela, good morning. Elizabeth, good morning. So those of you who have not taken this course before, who here has done a short sale before? Buyer or seller side? I'm seeing some hands.
Angela, Elizabeth, Michael, Bobby, Lori. Hold on.
Brilliant. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. I'm calling on somebody.
Katie. I see Katie.
Katie?
Yep. Let's see who else.
I'm going to call in Sherry.
I see, is it Lobin and Dawn? Am I saying your name right, Lobin? Ooh, we muted her. Okay, she's shaking her head yes.
Sherry, I just asked you to unmute. Tell us about your short sale that you did. Were you on the buyer or seller side?
I actually did about 80 short sales when I was an agent in California. So I'm kind of looking to see what the difference is here and there, because there you could kind of wipe away what you owed, and here it's not really like that.
No.
How long ago was that, Sherry?
I started doing them in 2008 through 2011, 2012.
Funny how that was almost 10 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Interesting. Sorry, we'll get to that in a second. All right, brilliant. No, Sherry, we appreciate you. Welcome to the East Coast. I'm actually sorry that you had to move out to the East Coast. I don't know what that reason was.
I think right now in these times, I'm probably better off here.
Well, we welcome you with open arms there. Brilliant. Who else has done a short sale that they want to share here? Keep your hand up.
Debbie has her hand up.
Debbie. All right, Debbie, go for it. Tell us about your short sale, buyer, seller side.
Hold on, you got to unmute her. Well, I asked to unmute.
She unmutes, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, she's unmuted. I still can't hear her. Debbie, you
got
a microphone?
I can't hear you, Debbie. Nope. It's saying she's unmuted too.
Yeah, she's got a microphone issue there. All right, we'll take one more. Sorry about that, Debbie. Who else? Anybody else? Nobody else wants to get called on.
No.
This is so sad. It's too early. I get it. Oh, Katie, do you have your hand up? There she is. All right, unmute. Go ahead, Katie. Tell us about your short sale.
So I'm actually working on one currently. It's been about 9 months. Just got approval due to close this month on the 18th.
Yay.
Yay. The seller or buyer side?
Seller side, so a lot of work involved. But, and I've done about 4 or 5 in the past. Obviously, they're not as prevalent as they were,
Brilliant. What was the either most challenging or easiest part for you?
Well, the loan got sold about 3 months into the process.
Mm-hmm.
That was a challenge.
What does that do to the file? It restarts, right? Restarts that.
Restarted from square one. So.
There it is. There it is. Gosh, well, thank you for sharing. This is cool. All right, I'm going to jump in with the title slide here. And again, good morning to everybody. And a lot of people, when they take this course for the first time, they're saying, well, why are we taking a short sale course? This is ridiculous where we are in the marketplace right now. We're still getting tremendous amount of bidding wars. The demand is off the charts. And now that, people are still, COVID options and coming into these homes are still an issue, but we're still seeing now lines for single showings into open houses, right? We just had an open house two Saturdays ago, and we had 60 people in line on the street to get in, right? So people are like, why are we taking a short sale class? We're not even close to negative equity territory. And I'm here to share with you some really interesting facts, right? So who here is aware, and this is easier when we're in person, But who here is like maybe a stats nerd like me? Who here wants to try to take a stab at what the traditional market cycle is nationally? Anybody want to take a stab at it? Dave, you look like you want to take a stab at it. No? No, he's nope. All right, never mind. Oh, how do you say your name? Is it Lobin or Lobin? Lobin, great. 10 years, she said, for a market cycle. 10 years. Elena, 10 years. Thank you for putting in the chat box. That makes it a little easier. 10 years is the market cycle. So, and it's funny because I, as a former banker, used to say that the market cycle nationally was a 7-year market cycle because that's what the stock cycle typically was. Then real estate cycles came, and I educated myself in real estate back in 2004, 2005, and said, oh, yeah, historically it's a 10-year national market cycle. And up until last year, we were saying, where were we 10 years ago? Where were we 10 years ago? Where were we 10 years ago? And 2007 and 8 turned into 2017 and 2018, and nothing happened. And, you know, I'm eating crow over and over and over again, right? And who am I? I'm not someone who can predict the future, and neither are any of us here in this room. But I will say this, that we as humans are always, always cyclical. And when I dove even further, and I started reading, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Ray Dalio, who is one of the biggest hedge fund managers in the world. He went back and dug into stats from the 1700s and said, except for 2 exceptions, which were world wars, the real estate market cycle has been 15 years. So we dove into that math, and I somewhat agree with him. But who knows what's going to happen, because it always takes a catalyst, right? So what I'm trying to say here is not to dive deep into nerddom like I do. You don't have to do that. But whether you've been in this business for 8 years or you've been in this business for 28 years, you start to see patterns. And the biggest one is at the very, 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 very top, where demand is at an all-time high and supply is low, and there's bidding wars and pricings. The higher that goes, the lower the crash feels. And it depends on what the catalyst is for that crash. Could be a national virus, could be a capital collapse of the banking system, could be unemployment at its all-time high. No one knows. But our job today, myself and Marianne, are to educate you so that not if, but when this happens, which I happen to feel is in the next 12 to 18 months, when this happens, you will be in a position to impact and help as many possible sellers as possible, and or assist as many possible buyers for these as possible. And our job today is not just to go over the basics and kind of what we do for a living, but our goal is to even overwhelm you. If you want to negotiate your own sales by the end of this 2 glorious hours with us, you will not only know what the short sale is and the general process, but you could actually negotiate your own files if that's what you chose to do. I don't know if that's what you choose to do. Maybe you have a team member for that. Maybe you'd like to hire an awesome third party, company that can do that for you. That was like with the teeth gleaming with the smile. No one saw that. That's okay. All right, we'll move on. So, opportunities and short sales. Does anyone want to jump in and tell me what a short sale is? You can either do it in the chat box or unmute yourself and just go for it.
How do you get the chat box up? I don't have a chat box.
Yep, chat. People are chatting. New Hampshire has a 12-year, Lobin said New Hampshire has about a 12-year cycle. Excellent. And Lobin, you are correct. It's very, very localized, right? But what happens once it starts in like one section of the country, it very quickly transverses, moves across the country as fast as possible, because that's just what, consumer confidence is shaken at that point. Anybody want to say, what is a short sale? The definition of a short sale. Dave.
It's when the lender is going to receive less money that's owed on the house.
That's correct. And what is owed on the house? Then what?
The payoff, mortgage payoff.
The mortgage payoff. Is there anything besides a mortgage that might be on the house?
Taxes.
Taxes that are owed on the property. Yep. Anything else?
Municipal liens, child support liens,
HOA liens.
different judgments, attachments.
There it is. Who's that? Is that Sherry?
Oh, it's me, Amanda Reichert.
Amanda, thank you.
Amanda.
Amanda, thank you, Amanda. Yes, yes, yes. So Amanda's right. A short sale is when the value of a home is less than not just the first mortgage or the second mortgage or the third mortgage or the judgment or the execution or the credit cards or the mechanics liens, right? It's all of that put together. If any one of those attachments is not able to be paid off with the equity in that home, you have to sell it short, meaning that you have to deal with one or more or all of the creditors on that sale. So we're going to jump in. Why would anybody do a short sale? Jump in with me and talk to me.
It prevents a foreclosure. It's a better alternative than foreclosure.
Why is it a better alternative than foreclosure?
It's less impactful on the credit report, and the debts are generally forgiven versus the foreclosure where they are carried on beyond.
I'm scrolling furiously trying to find out who's speaking.
It's me. It's me. I'm
Amanda.
Reichert again.
Amanda.
Okay, man. Brilliant. Yes, Amanda. Obviously, yes. Well, we're familiar with what you do for work too, so you're very familiar with this process. Very good. Very, very good. What do you know roughly, like the exactly how it affects a credit score versus a foreclosure?
Not really.
Not really. That's okay. Is anyone here a loan officer? As I furiously scroll, this is way harder than like people just being in a room. All right, that's okay. With our loan officers that we work with, typically what happens in a foreclosure, right? In a foreclosure, the homeowner has kind of walked away from their obligation, and that's like the worst case scenario, right? That's the worst case. So after a foreclosure, they are not able to even get like a credit card or a car loan or even like get into landlords are very tough on foreclosures because it looks as though the consumer walked away. A loan officer will say it takes 7 years to recover from a foreclosure on your credit score, in your credit report, versus if you recover from a short sale, you do everything the right way and you pay off your debts. A couple of our loan officers can get them requalified for a loan in 1 year. I think the majority of it is 2 years. Majority you can recover in 2 years and get back on their feet. So it's a very big deal. How about a deed in lieu of foreclosure? I'm going to just jump in the soapbox now so I don't have to do it later, and Marion will be happy that I don't take up that much time. How about a deed in lieu of foreclosure? Has anyone heard of that?
Basically just give it back to them instead of doing the process of foreclosure. You just deed it back to the bank.
There it is, right? They send a nice little letter to that homeowner that's in default, right? And the nice little letter says, we're here to work with you. Trust us. We're your lender. Let's do this together. And they have all these little options, right? Let's talk to us about a loan modification. Talk to us about this. Talk about that. One of those options is a deed in lieu, or DIL. And would you know that if the homeowner believes that paper and subscribes to that deed in lieu and sends back the keys in exchange for the deed in the house, that hurts their credit just as bad as a foreclosure does. But the bank's not going to tell you that, right? And I'm not going to go into the soapbox just yet on how the bank has to act as if they are trying to help the homeowners with that letter of a forbearance or a deferral or a loan modification. And while looking to do that and pretending to push them into such programs like a loan modification, that 90% of them fail, because they've acted as if and they push those loan modifications out that ultimately fail, they get government money to bail them out when that loan defaults. We won't go into any of that today. That's a whole other soapbox for our 3-hour course. I'm sure you're excited. We won't do that today. So, but anyway, let's continue down this path. So credit scores are one of the big benefits of a short sale. Oh, I see what happened. Marion, I lost remote control. So one of the benefits is the credit scores that are being impacted. What's another benefit? Why would someone do a short sale over a foreclosure or just let it go?
Great. You accept it.
Yes, Rick. I agree.
Not provided. They are inquiring.
I'm going to mute. Marianne, if you want to mute everybody again, just have to click participants and then the mute all button. Actually, I'll do it right now.
Okay, good.
All right. And you can unmute yourself, Marianne, and the hosts. So I'm going to just jump right through. Let's see. We talked about what a short sale is. Avoid foreclosure. Whoops. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, God. I can't go back. Can't go back. Oh, God. Marianne, help me. There we go. Okay, I've got it. Don't touch. Don't touch. Avoid foreclosure. Reduce negative impact on credit rating. Here's some other things that we see, right? So in the event of a short sale, people who actually need this help. By the way, what are we seeing now? I'm asking this as a rhetorical question, but I'm happy to answer it because of the soapboxes. We had a massive economic stimulus with the CARES Act that hit, right? Massive. We had stimulus checks come out. We had $600 per week in extra unemployment benefits for people who wanted to get unemployment. We had PPP forgiveness loans issued to business owners to keep their full-time equivalent staff on par. What's going to happen once business owners who've already realized they can operate with less staff and no office space, right? What's going to happen when those stimulus checks run out? What's going to happen after the PPP loans are forgiven and there's no more grant money for the payroll for these businesses? Ultimately, what happens is, right, companies have now learned to operate with less office space, less employees, less overhead. And therefore, people have lost a tremendous amount of income, right? Especially those in the hospitality, especially those that have been massively affected, that are essentially anyone who's not in manufacturing, which is kind of interesting because manufacturing was at the low point just 10 years ago. And now it's hospitality and finance and the white collar. So interestingly enough, what does that do? It gives them, they don't have any assets to help keep afloat their home. Maybe a home that they might have slightly, reached for when they got that promotion or got that job before. Maybe they don't have the money to maintain their home. So while they can afford their mortgage payments, they have a roof leak, but now can't afford the 2 to 5 to 10 grand to then fix their roof issue. And therefore, they're not able to sell at top retail. So it stops depleting other assets. They don't have to keep their house afloat anymore by trying to fund not just the mortgage payments, but all of the maintenance that are required. And it helps as, I call it a reset button to regain control of their finances. Quick personal story, in 2005, I got hurt very badly with a short sale. That's one of the reasons Marianne and I got into this business in 2009. I was hurt very badly, and I understand exactly what a seller goes through with their emotional checkout. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want the collections calls. They don't want any of it. So I'll go into that story a little bit later as we talk about how to best represent buyers and sellers in short sales. But for right now, I'm going to go to my beautiful partner who's the brains and beauty behind the operation. Her name is Marianne Little. Marianne, take it away. You are muted. Do I have to unmute you? No, there you are.
Does that work? Okay. Do I have control of the screen now?
You have control of the screen.
All right. Whoops. Did I just skip a screen? Oh, jeez. All right. We're jumping way ahead. Previous.
I think the backspace button will also take you previous too. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Guys,
All
this
right.
is not easy.
We have the technical difficulties out of the way. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Nick and I really appreciate it. We've been teaching now a long time, probably 7 or 8 years. And then in 2015, we went forward to be able to give the CEU credits because it didn't make sense for us to just go and teach and not be able to give these credits. So I have to give thanks to Nick for that because he did all the legwork. So you're a listing agent and you're meeting with a potential short sale client, and you need to find out if it is a short sale. I know there's one agent in the group that's currently going through this right now. And so the best way to find out if the person that you're sitting with has equity or doesn't have equity is to find out what they owe on the property. And how do you do that? You find out through payoff statements and mortgage statements. And again, as Nick said earlier, it's not just the mortgage statements, it's accumulation of everything. So it could be IRS liens, and we talked about welfare liens and Department of Revenue liens. So the total amount of debt is what you have to look at when you're listing a short sale. So when you go into your appointment for the first time with your homeowner, you may want to sit down and say, hey, before I come meet with you, could you please grab a couple of your payoff statements? That'll help you understand if, what kind of money you may get out of your sale. Because again, even if it's a traditional sale, they may want to know. And then if you sit down and all of a sudden you have an idea of what market value might be, then yeah, you can tell at that point, hopefully it may or may not be a short sale. And then of course, if you ever have a question, or if you think you can't tell right away, then you can always call someone like me and we can do some extra digging, if that makes sense. So I can order title with Lori and we can see what else is on title and what might impact that sale. Does that make sense for everybody? You can just, yeah. All right. You're gonna also determine, if you do determine it's probably likely a short sale, that they have a hardship. So very easy to determine the hardship. What has led to the person not being able to either A, afford the property, or B, make their mortgage payments, make payments on other things? What is the issue that's causing them financial distress? So does that trigger a notice to anyone? No. So not yet. So when you first start to default, there's not a notice, I believe, until you're after 90 days late. Then they call it the official notice of default. I believe mortgage originators and mortgage brokers have access to a notice of default lists. So then it can become public information. So once you're determining the hardship and figuring out if they have a hardship and what that hardship is, because if they don't have a hardship, they may be able to A, bring money to closing. So let's say they're $30,000 short. You determine after all of the debt that they're $30,000 short. If these people have money, if they have $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in the bank, it's really more or less they're going to bring that to closing, and it's not a short sale. They could bring it to closing. Otherwise, the bank may think it is a strategic default. Let me see what other questions. Are there costs for the research? What does the title company charge? I will let Lori answer that at the end of this, but usually you want to align with a good title company. Lighthouse can work with you on that and find out exactly what's on title. If you work with us, then we will get that for you as well. And what are the other assets and liability? Yes. So you want to see, as I said earlier, if someone has $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in the bank and they can bring that $30,000 to closing, then no, there is not really a hardship. So they could bring that money to bank and you can go to closing. Or they could bring that money out of the bank and then you can go to the closing and they can close. So that's something, yes, you want to determine if there's other money, other assets, other liabilities. You want to examine their motivation if it's a short sale. And this one I love, because if you have a seller that you are working with and they don't want, or they're non-motivated, they don't want to get you paperwork that you need. This is a heavy paperwork, heavy process. If they're not motivated to get you this information and get it on time, it can really slow down your sale or even halt your sale. So you want to determine if the seller is motivated to get you what you need for a short sale. An auction doesn't necessarily mean there's a short sale. I've had investors, a lot of investors call me, even some listing agents call me and say, hey, this property is going to foreclosure in 2 weeks. I spoke to the seller. I want to short sell their property, but there was plenty of equity. So it does, just because you see a foreclosure going in the paper, it does not mean it's a short sale. They could have equity. So hopefully they'll just list it with you and you can sell it for above what they owe. And if they can't, then it will probably go to foreclosure. And of course, as you're sitting in your appointment with them, you want to get the basic listing agreement signed. So we'll go over that. So types of short sales that you will run into. The types of short sales you're going to run into are your traditional short sales, which are non-government sponsored enterprise, or we call them non-GSE. Your Freddie and Fannie short sales, they probably make up about 50% of the short sale market, along with FHA, USDA, VA, and you have reverse mortgages. And we'll go into each of those a little bit more in detail. So how do you find out who the investor or the servicer of this loan is? And why is it important to find out the investor? Why do you want to know if it's Freddie or Fannie or FHA? Well, you want to find out because they have guidelines that will help you set up your short sale. So if it's an FHA short sale, you actually have to have that listed for 15 days. Now, you don't want to put an FHA short sale on the market and have a situation where there's multiple offers and you take that down on the 13th day and you get all your short sale paperwork together and you package and you submit it to the seller's lender and find out that you didn't have it on for the appropriate time. So then they make you put it up for another 15 days. So it's important to know the investor of the loan, and if you are going to, if you're able to follow certain guidelines to make your short sale smooth. That's what your ultimate goal is, to make the short sale smooth. And you don't always have control of that. As we talked to the young lady earlier, she said that her loan was sold. That can happen more than once on a short sale. If your loan is sold, that can tack on another 6, 8, 10 weeks, sometimes months. So you don't always have control of the situation. But if you know how to set up your short sale from the beginning correctly, it should eliminate most of the issues that you have. Can a VA be reassigned? VA loan, not to my knowledge. It's the VA is an investor of the loan, or it's a VA type loan. It's specific to this specific buyer. And if I'm not answering your question the way you're asking it, can it be reassigned to another mortgage? Can it be reassigned to another servicer? Yes, but ultimately it's still a VA loan. So ways to find out who the investor of the loan is: the registry holds clues, right? You can go to the registry of deeds and look up the mortgage. If it's FHA, you're going to see a big box on the upper right-hand corner, and it'll say FHA with a case number, and you want to write down that case number because that will help you in the future. Sometimes you're going to see assignments on title. Those assignments, usually, those are a clue for me. Nick and I will see these and we'll go, oh, there's assignments on title. That is an investor of a loan trying to connect the dots so they can foreclose. So sometimes it's a good indication that they're well into the default process. All right, let me see. I saw some more questions come in. Can you please explain, if it is sold, how it restarts?
I got it already, Marianne. I said we'll talk about the dreaded restart later on.
Yeah, okay. Well, Nick will handle the dreaded restart. I like that, the dreaded restart. Yeah, Nick will talk a little bit about that, but it can restart. And selling a loan can restart it from the beginning. Basically, you could be halfway through, they sell the loan, and boom, you're right back to the beginning. I mean, it's pretty simple as that. This is just an example of what I was telling you, what you might find in, again, I have one of the Massachusetts ones in here, but they're all the same. If you look on here, you can see FHA case numbers, you can see the investors of the loan, so you know who, or you know the guidelines to look up to be able to list your short sale and list it properly. So we'll go over some of the more common investors of short sales, or insurers. So HUD is an insurer of short sales, so that you know exactly how to set up your short sale correct from the beginning. So Freddie and Fannie, when you're sitting with a homeowner, it's really nice. You can say, hey, this is a Freddie back loan, this is a Fannie back loan. If you're living in the house, obviously, as we go through this process, they will pay you $3,000 at closing for what they call a relocation incentive or a moving incentive. So it really is a nice little program that they have. Now, if the homeowner moved out and the bank goes in to assess the property, they send the valuation agent out, they send the BPO agent out, they send the appraiser out, and you're not in the property, you're not entitled to that $3,000. They have to be living in the property. Freddie and Fannie will offer $6,000 if you have a second mortgage. So let's say you have a home equity line or an 80-20 loan. So they will offer $6,000 to settle the second mortgage. The beauty of the Freddie and Fannie program, the $6,000, so somebody earlier was talking about they were from California. They have a nice program in California on first mortgages that if you close your short sale, they automatically release the deficiency on the note, which we'll get into later. But the deficiency on the note is basically what you owe versus the net the bank gets at closing. So there's a difference, and let's say it's $20,000 or $30,000. That money can be looked at as ordinary income. It can be taxed. They could potentially go after it later. So we'll get into the ways they may attack that money, or they may just write it off, which is nice too. This $6,000 that you're seeing on your screen, if it's a Freddie and Fannie sale, then they have to write off the deficiency. They have to write off the balance of the loan. They have to write it off on that second mortgage, or you're not going to get the $6,000 from Freddie or Fannie. Freddie or Fannie, unfortunately, will not pay any other liens on title. So that kind of stinks. So other liens, we already talked about them. They are medical potential liens, or Department of Revenue liens, or IRS liens. There could be anything. These are personal, this is personal debt associated with the homeowner. And what stinks with Freddie and Fannie is they don't pay towards those liens. But if you know that up front, again, you can set this up for your listing to go properly so that it can get covered in some other manner so that you can still close your short sale. They do require full release of the secondary mortgages. I just talked about that. They may, the other thing is Freddie and Fannie may, and again, they are looking at your finances through the whole thing. They may ask for cash or a note or a contribution at closing. If you have money, if you make a good job, if you have a good job, and you're just in a tough situation. So Nick and I did a short sale in Haverhill, Massachusetts once, and it was a divorce situation. They wanted $10,000 from the seller at closing. This was on Fannie Mae, and that that's a big chunk of change to bring for someone. But the sellers both had really good jobs, and they were just trying to sell the house because they were getting a divorce. We renegotiated that amount. That amount went down to $5,000, and then both ex-spouses were able to bring $2,500 to closing, and they were able to sell their property. So it is not really, I wouldn't encourage anybody to go into a short sale and go, hey, you don't have to pay any money toward the closing. You don't have to pay money. That's not always the case. And what I would say is make sure you have a pretty clear idea of what their financial situation is before you kind of offer a statement like that, because it may be untrue. Applied to the payoff. I don't know. I am not sure I understand the question, Loban. Does it apply to the payoff? Can I unmute her?
Yeah.
Nick, do you have control? I gotta find her first because
she can mute herself too. Go ahead, Loban.
Can you unmute her, Nick?
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So the let me go to my page on here. So say the 3,000 or the 6,000 that they are giving you as the seller as a credit, right?
Yeah.
It's something that they will try to recapture at closing.
No. So the $3,000 moving incentive cannot be touched. You can't pay water out of it. You can't pay sewer. You can't pay anything. You can't pay any other debt out of it. You're going to get that check at closing, $3,000, and it can't be applied toward anything else you may owe on the property, unfortunately. But that's a great question. Did we skip a slide? How did I get here? Nick.
Yes.
Did you take control of my screen, my friend?
No, you did.
What?
No, I did not. Hit the backspace button.
There we go. Okay. So, waiting for Nick. All right. So 5 minutes. Yeah. On Freddie and Fannie, it has to be on the market 5 days. That includes a weekend. So if you guys go to list a Freddie and Fannie property and you only put it up for 3 days because you got multiple offers, and you take it down and you submit it and you go through all this work, they're going to make you put it back up for 5 days. It has to be on the market a minimum of 5 days, and that includes a weekend. So please keep that in mind. Non-GSEs, I'm really not going to go over because, because there's no guidelines online usually for non-GSEs. You will just have to call the servicer and find out what their guidelines are, or find out what paperwork they want. FHA is similar to Fannie and Freddie. They will pay a $3,000 moving incentive if the homeowner doesn't owe other liens. So this one is different than Fannie and Freddie. If there's a secondary lien on title for an FHA, you can use the $3,000 toward that. So let's say there's a $1,500 septic something due. You can use out of the $3,000 $1,500. And again, it's the same situation on the FHA short sales. If they're living in the property, they get the $3,000. If they've moved out of the property, you do not get that $3,000. So that's really important when you're talking to your client. They will pay up to $1,500 to the junior lien holders, which is nice. This one has to be listed for 15 days. If you do not have a FHA short sale on for 15 days, they will make you put the short sale back on the market for 15 days. So that can really tick off a lot of people, especially if you already have a buyer and seller who have come to an arrangement and agreement on the price. Can the agent mitigation person ask for financial statement up front from the seller? Yes, you can. And non-GSE is the same as conventional. Yep, correct. Not sold in the secondary market. It can be sold in the secondary market. It can be kept in-house. So it really depends on the loan itself. But a lot of the times when we're doing GSE loans, they're from like these smaller servicers that you've never heard of, Ditech, Rushmore. Well, you know, Bank of America can do it too, and so can Wells Fargo. So on most short sales, are the sellers still living there? I would say about, yeah, 50 to 60% short sales sellers are still living in the property. And then of course, the last thing on the FHA end is the servicer has to net 84 to 88% of the appraised value. So FHA sends out an appraiser. They do an appraisal, and your offer, your buyer's offer, has to come in between 84 and 88% of that appraised value, and that is depending on when it was listed. So the first 30 days, you have to get an offer within 88%. If it's the next 60 days, then it can go to 86%, and then the last 30 days, you can have 84%. So it's 120 days that you'll have to get what the net is from the appraisal. All right, so let me go on. Fannie Mae, I won't stay long on this. They require a two-step process. If you're doing a Fannie Mae short sale, they want you to submit it to the servicer first. So whoever the servicer is, I gave you some examples here, Chase, Bank of America, Wells. And then you have to take the exact same package and enter it into HomePath, which is their own negotiation platform that they use online. You get a free login, and then you're basically working on two different platforms, whether it's the servicer platform and the HomePath platform, until you get your Fannie Mae short sales done. How long are listing agreements typically on short sales? I would do a year. Personally, I would do a year. All right, so here's just another area for you. So in case you want to look up certain guidelines before you list, I'm not going to stay on this too long. All right, so you're the listing agent, and why would you want to, I mean, you're reading it on your screen, but why would you want to pull your title up front? Why is it important to maybe get with somebody like Lori and say, hey, I have a short sale happening? Why would you want to talk to her before you even list it? Nick, are you around? Can you unmute people?
They can unmute themselves if they want to do it, but there's a lien. Loban says liens.
So I think if you are sitting here and you're reading the screen, the reason that you want to have title up front is you want to see what affects your closing. What are the things that you're going to need to worry about before you close this short sale? And there's a lot. So when you look at it, it usually goes by recording date. So the oldest recording, which would probably be the mortgage, usually, not always, the oldest recording gets the most money. The next one under that, if it's a second mortgage, they get the next kind of money, or a lot less. But then you're looking at credit card liens, excuse me, IRS liens, Department of Health liens, water, sewer. They have to be negotiated. And what do you do if you know there's a Freddie and Fannie first, right? And they don't allow secondary debt to be negotiated out of the proceeds. These are things you want to know up front. So how do you attack this short sale if you know a water and sewer lien of $800 is not going to be paid by Freddie and Fannie? Or an IRS lien is not going to be paid by Freddie and Fannie? You want to know these things up front so you can set up your short sale appropriately. so that you know where this money is coming from. It's usually coming from the buyer, but if you disclose this information up front, if you let the buyer know what's up front, you give them a copy of the title report and say, these are the issues that I'm running into, they will feel so much better about working with you.
So aren't these, question?
Yeah.
Aren't these liens superior to the first mortgage even? And including the land leases?
No, no. Typically, the only thing superior to the first mortgage might be town taxes. Sometimes HOAs. So when you're talking about like what can foreclose over a first mortgage, what can take over a first mortgage? Taxes, town taxes, so they can foreclose over the mortgage, and sometimes HOA fees can, or HOA companies can.
And land lease.
And what was the last one?
Land lease.
Land lease?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Primary responsibility, if you are negotiating, these are the things you want to keep in mind. You are, as the agent, you're going to serve as the seller's authorized representative. That you're the authorized representative to the bank, to the other people in the transaction. You are the communicator of the transaction. And I always say this during every sale, you're the conductor of the orchestra. You're talking to buyer's agents, you're talking to banks, you're talking to the seller, you may be talking to attorneys, you may be talking to title companies. So you are the person that is conducting the orchestra. You're the one that has the thumbnail and everything that's happening. You're their liaison to all the communication. You want to communicate or coordinate their paperwork. So you have bank statements, pay stubs, authorizations, arm's length transaction forms. These all have to be coordinated by you. You're negotiating all the liens. So even non-mortgage junior liens, you're dealing with them and that paperwork, which may be different than the mortgage paperwork. And of course, you're obtaining and distributing payoff letters to attorneys and title companies so that at closing, you can bring it all together and get it to closing. You're facilitating the entire sale with good communication, paperwork, negotiations, and of course, at the end, you're delivering your HUD-1 or your CD so that you can close. Good traits if you're a good negotiator. Here's a good one. I always like to say proper representation and disclosure. Sold as is should be in your listing. If you know it's a short sale, you want to sell it sold as is. You want to disclose, disclose, disclose. 2, set expectations. So that could be with anybody. That could be with the seller. So if you know you need paperwork and you need the bank statements and the pay stubs at the beginning of every month, when you're sitting down with your listing or at the first time with your listing person and you're talking to that seller, you want to say to them, listen, Mr. or Mrs. Smith, if you want this short sale process to go well, I am going to need this amount of paperwork from you, and I'm going to need your bank statements and pay stubs potentially at the beginning of every month. So you're setting the expectations with the seller. You want to set the expectations with the buyers. If a buyer comes in and says, hey, I want to place an offer on your property, but they want to close in 30 days, that's probably not possible. It's probably not the best buyer for your short sale because it's a short sale and you probably are not going to close in 30 days. So you're setting the expectations even with the buyer. You want to keep track of the paperwork and submit complete applications. You have to have a thoroughness and attention to detail and keep records of correspondence with the lenders and try to communicate frequently. And this sometimes is not easy. Some of these lenders have, you know, Equator, or they have what they call secure messaging. So sometimes you really even can't keep some of these records. It's really hard. You want to ensure the valuation of the property. You're representing the client's situation. So every time that you do one of these, typically a BPO is ordered or a valuation is ordered. You want to be prepared for that. You want to represent your client in the best way possible and show up to that appointment prepared. And we'll go into that in a little bit further in the presentation. Make sure you're working with people who understand short sales. Lori Harding understands short sales. Her team understands short sales. It's really important that you're working with people that understand, because you could end up in a situation where if you, here's a good example. You can end up in a situation where you don't know if something's on title what to do with it. So we have a situation down on one of our Massachusetts sales where the seller passed away, and there are executions on title. Now, I had a long talk with the title company down there and back and forth, and this wasn't just a day or two. Like, we went for a week back and forth and with an attorney, and got to the point where the attorney can insure that title even though those executions are still on title. So these are things, work with people that understand them if you don't, because I would have sat there and spent my wheels negotiating these 4 executions, but I have such a good team that understood that because the seller died, the executions died with the seller. So that was nice. And of course, do not give advice beyond your expertise. I've had agents try to explain the tax ramifications on a short sale when they do discharge the debt. Don't do that. Just tell the seller to reach out to their CPA, to their accountant. You could say, yeah, you may have tax ramifications, but you're not a financial expert. Please call your CPA or your attorney. And then, of course, lastly, you want to understand the approval terms you're getting. Are they getting a deficiency release? Are they not getting a deficiency release? These are things you want to understand if you're a good negotiator in the process. Assess your listing. You know, sold as is, we already talked about. You absolutely should have subject to third-party approval in your listing. And then, of course, any additional fees that might be required. So you're disclosing to them that it is subject to a third-party approval. That means the bank or other lien holders. It's sold as is, meaning the seller is not going to be fixing the property. Now, maybe the seller has funds and they can, but most situations, the sellers do not have funds to do that, which is why they're in the situation that they're in. And then, of course, the additional liens, like let's say you find there's a $6,000 credit card lien. Maybe you think you can negotiate that down to $300 to $500. So you may want to disclose that there could be additional liens that the buyer has to pay for. Of course, they can take that out of their purchase price before they make their offer. But again, this is why it's really important that you work with somebody in a title position that can pull the title, look at it for you, and tell you exactly what you have to negotiate off the title. This is just our little kind of conductor of the orchestra picture, where you as the negotiator pretty much touch everybody in the transaction to get it done. So, and then I will give it back to Nick.
Awesome.
Can I ask another question, please?
Yes, let's take a quick question before. Yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead.
The question was, how do we make sure that there is nothing in terms of covenants from the city in terms of grants? For example, lead paint remediation, or seller can't sell the property in 3 years. Or in California, they used to have mellow roofs and all of these sunscreen grants and all those types of things.
Well, one, I think you can call the city and ask about this particular property. We had one, we were working in Tewksbury, Massachusetts, and we were going to try to negotiate it, and the seller wanted us to negotiate. And once I spoke to the town, I realized we could not negotiate it because they were in a situation like that where it was they got a low income property in a beautiful neighborhood, and there were certain things that were going on with that. So I would say absolutely call the town, look at the mortgages online, and that's how I found out about it. So I looked at her mortgage online and I started reading things I had never seen before. And that's when I talked to the seller and I said, I need to call your town and find out what this is. So you want to call the town and find out about the property, find out if there's any types of covenants you need to be working on, if you can even work on it. We weren't even allowed to touch this property in Tewksbury, so we didn't go much further. It had to be done by their town attorney. So that's all we could do.
Right. To me, there is a step before even short sale, which is really understanding the workout, if there is a possibility of workout at all.
Right. That is true. You want to see if there is a possibility. Most of the sellers we're dealing with have already tried forbearance. They've already tried modifications. Not all the time, but I would say most people, when they get to a short sale, have already explored all other options. They may have already gone through bankruptcy. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And Neeraj, that was the whole soapbox that I talked about last time. A lot of banks will offer forbearance and offer loan modifications, knowing that the real statistic, I think you know because you're very knowledgeable in this business, right? The real stat of how many of those actually move forward into coming back online as performing notes is very, very low, right? It's a 10% performance rate. So they have a 90% failure rate on loan mods. And quit touching my screen, Marianne.
I'm trying to write back to somebody and it's touching the screen. I'm sorry.
I can't. Oh, now I've lost connection. Oh, God. Okay. Oh, God. All right, you don't touch the screen anymore. I get the screen.
All right, I'm just going to reply to somebody in the chat box.
Okay.
Unless you want to answer this question, it's from Lobin. She says,
I'm
what
just trying to
happens
get it to the right
not
slot.
enough funds to cover the other liens?
If there's not, well, in Lobin, that itself is the definition of the short sale, right? So whether, let's say there's enough to cover the first and second mortgage, but not enough to cover executions and judgments, you're still dealing with a short. You're still subject to that third-party approval from that, sorry. From
Can
that.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yes.
So if there's not enough funds to cover the other liens, is the seller still responsible to cover those other liens and the short sale proceed forward?
That's a great question. I mean, so it really depends on what the bank sees, right? So Marianne's going to get into what is disclosed when it comes time to put the full package together that goes to that bank, right? The seller just discloses all of their income, all of their expenses, all their assets, and all their liabilities. And depending on what the bank sees and depending on what they have disclosed in that package, that will dictate whether the bank says, hey, you know something? And you know what? We'll cover this now, Marianne. If you're okay with it, Marianne, we can cover this now real quick, and that'll save us some time at the end, right? So good question, Lobin, right? So the seller discloses all their income, all their expenses, all their assets, and all their liabilities. The bank can do one of three things, right? Number one, the seller has disclosed that, yep, they lost their job, they have no more income, but they might have disclosed, I have 8 boats and 4 investment properties, and I also own a small island off the coast of Florida, right? So the bank can say, okay, well, geez, we'll approve the short sale, but we want, you know, you don't have the income, but we want, you know, a $100,000 cash payment at the closing in exchange for us accepting this short sale payoff, right? So they can ask for cash at closing. Or they can be a seller that discloses, you know what, I don't have anything anymore. You know, I can't afford this house anymore, but I make $400,000 a year, and my net income, let's say, is $200,000 a year. But I can't afford the house anymore. The bank can look at that and say, oh, well, interesting. Okay, well, we'll still accept the short payoff if you agree to sign a promissory note for $75,000 at a 0% interest rate for the next 5 years, right? So the bank can ask for cash at closing, depending on if there's a lot of assets that they see, that they sniff around and sense. They can ask for a promissory note at closing in exchange for signing to doing a short sale, right? And the third here is they can also reserve the right to pursue a deficiency judgment, right? Or reserving the right to pursue is what we call. That's nasty little language that they do put in some of the approval letters that we see. What that means is that while right now they don't intend to have them sign a promissory note, they don't intend to have them bring cash to closing, but they will reserve the right in the next, depending on the state, Mass and New Hampshire are different. But let's say in Massachusetts, I'm getting my states crossed. In Massachusetts, I believe they have 3 years to get an attorney to go to the court and get a judgment for the balance owed on that short sale. So they have to go through the legal process to get that judgment. And then they'd have 20 years to collect the deficiency, that judgment, that amount of money that they were short.
Nick, I think she was referring to the other liens on the property, not mortgages. So like, let's say there's executions and credit card.
No, it was actually all of it. So that was helpful. But my question to you is, if the seller has their other funds I asked this earlier, if the other funds are set up in an LLC, can the lender still go after the LLC for those, that money? Or I
don't think so, because unless the LLC funds are commingled in with their regular bank statements, or if the LLC is how they get their money. So let's say the LLC is their, you know, they work for themselves, then yes. So if the LLC is where they get their money, they're going to want to see bank statements from the LLC. If the LLC is something completely separate that has nothing to do with their personal bank accounts, and then no, they're not going to be looking at that. Because they're going to ask, where do you get your income, right? How do you get paid? And if you get paid through an LLC, then they're going to want to see the LLC statements.
But the LLC could be an asset too. Then they want to see the assets.
Yes, yep.
Because the LLC, if you are the sole owner of the LLC or you are the manager or officer of the LLC, they want to see the assets of the LLC as a business.
Right.
Correct. That's correct. So it's really about, and right, it's by law, the seller must disclose all their assets, all their liabilities, all their income. And what our team does is our team tries to encourage them to just, you know, they have to be accurate, but remember all your expenses, right? Remember all your liabilities. Like, don't leave any of those out, because if you leave them out, you look better on paper, right? And we're trying to negotiate this to try to help you get out of your situation. So, just encourage, we, as a short sale negotiator, we encourage our clients just to kind of come up with, okay, any other expenses you can think of, any other liabilities you can think of, so that the bank is looking at them not as, you know, a juicy red apple for them to bite out of, right? That's kind of what we try to do.
Is that financial statement a sworn statement?
I'm sorry?
Is that financial statement a sworn statement subject to fraud?
It's subject to the fraud statute, yes. And what, Marianne, what we've seen in the past, right? Lori can speak more to this as well, not because it was her company, but I'm sure she's heard it through the grapevine. They have, if they sense fraud after the short sale, the bank has a right to rescind the short sale approval letter, despite the fact that it has been closed and then resold 9 times in the last 20 years. They can rescind it if they feel that there's a fraud statute. So yes, it is subject to the fraud statute. I'm going to jump through. I have a couple really important slides on the specific duties of a listing agent and a buyer's agent when it comes to short sales. So we're going to just try to jump through these.
We're at 10, so I'm just letting you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to try to get through. These are important slides for everyone here. So first, we're going to talk about listing agent, the duties that you have to your seller as a fiduciary. And I want some feedback on this. Typically, in a traditional sale, not a short sale, what is typically what the seller wants? Does anyone want to jump in with that one? You can either do chat or unmute.
They want to sell their house or property.
For what?
For money.
For how much money, Logan?
For the most money they can get.
There it is. Highest amount of money, and typically on their time frame, right? Whatever, if they want it, whether it's quick or a long time frame, they want the most amount of money on their time frame. So as a fiduciary, and by the way, don't worry, we're not going to ask you how to define old cart or, COAL, or depending on what you learn for fiduciary, right? That's a whole nother course. But depending on what you have worked out with your conventional seller, right? At the end of the day, they typically want the most amount of money and closing on their time frame, be it as long or as short as they want, while protecting any other small things you discuss with them. The question here is that duty the same to a short sale seller? What is the ultimate and best outcome for this short sale seller? Does anyone want to jump in? I just was told that my audio is sporadic. Is that true? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, the best outcome is that they can walk away from the property with least damage to their credit and to their future.
And Niraj mentioned that exactly. Walking away from the property with the least amount of damage to their credit, right? I'm starting to get into this because it's difficult for a lot of regular traditional agents to work a short sale because they still feel, right? The battery's running low. Oh, I'm having all sorts of issues. I thought this was plugged. This isn't plugged in at all. Oh my God. We have issues.
And Nick, we can hear you fine.
You can hear me fine? Okay. Greg, I think that might be on your side, my friend. Your internet connection might be a little slow. All right. There we go. So, okay, no more warnings. We're good to go on this. So on the fiduciary side, as Niraj just mentioned, right? we have almost a different outcome for our sellers. So here's where we start to talk about some issues and challenges that we have while representing a seller. Number one, is the seller always going to be what's the word? Totally transparent with you coming in for the listing appointment? Are they? No, Amanda, I'm gonna have you unmute.
No way.
Have you had experience with that already?
Well, I'm working with someone now, and it's, oh, I have this. Oh, and by the way, I have that. And I say, okay, well, what about this? What about that? What about municipal liens? What about tax liens? What about, oh, well, I mean, it's just, they're definitely, and I think a lot of it is they're probably embarrassed. But no, they are not forthcoming.
They're not forthcoming. I usually go into a whole script here as to how to kind of pull data out from the sellers, but I'm just going to cut right to the chase and ask this question. What are some things that we can look for in a home while we're doing the initial walkthrough where it will prompt us to ask a little bit more probing questions as we're walking through?
Deferred maintenance.
Deferred maintenance. Excellent. What things have you seen? You're a divorce specialist, right, Amanda?
Yep, I am. So, and I deal with this a lot. So I ask a lot of questions. I have huge questionnaires that I ask people, whether it's divorce or whether it's equitable sales, because you just never know what type of hidden gems you're going to find. But roof, furnace, septic. I always ask about the septic. I ask about mold. We talk about settling and foundation issues. Pests, but those are usually the big ones.
That's it. 100% agree. So that's usually what prompts us to start asking those probing questions, right? Mr. Seller, it seems as we're walking through this house, I know you said you wanted to sell at top retail, and we're happy to do that, but I've kind of mentioned a couple things that might need to get done, and you're a little resistant to, I understand, and it's a little bit of money to deal with these issues, right? So, but based on what I do for a living, based on everything I see and how I'm a specialist in these types of situations, I have to ask a couple questions. Can I ask, what do you owe on this property? And has there been an issue recently? Has there been an income issue? And remember, I represent you. None of this goes anywhere. This is, I'm here for you on this. It becomes it's an emotional conversation that you're having with the seller to try to pull this data and information out. And again, having gone through the situation, Michael in the chat, I saw him popping up with his answers. One thing that has always, hands down the case, if you walk through the seller's kitchen or dining room table, you'll see a container. Sometimes we call it an ice bucket, right? Or just a basket that they have full of unopened mail. And that seems to be the number one common denominator that all people that are in a financial situation seem to have. Do you know why? Because they don't have the energy to open up another creditor letter. They don't have the energy to answer another creditor phone call. They just want everything to stop. They don't want to be the recipient of any more calls or letters that are just bad news over and over and over again. So what do? They take their mail and just dump it on a table, or they dump it in a box somewhere. So that is that's essentially one of the big indicators. So here's what we're gonna stop it, Marianne. Stop
Sorry, I'm just trying to respond.
So that's one of the big indicators is what we're doing. So now we're going to talk about what is the thing we're trying to prevent with the short sale seller. Well, number one, we want them to not having foreclosure, right? We want to try to get this sale through. Does that mean that we're looking for, is price the number one key factor here? We're not gonna say it again. Like, get another laptop. No, I'm just kidding.
All right,
Okay.
yes, get along now.
I think it's weird. I can't respond to comments while you're talking.
No, you can't. You just have to keep your mouse at the bottom in the black where the chat is, and just don't click anywhere nearby the screen. Like, move your chat box to the right where the photos are. Sorry. All right. Anyway. I got it. Thank you.
All right.
So is price the number one key factor? And if not, let's talk about that. Normally, we're short on time, so I'm just going to kind of blow through this. And I'd like feedback and ask you guys, but let me ask you this, right? The number one reason What is the number one reason everyone hates short sales? Let's go into this real fast. This is the important part. Number one reason everybody hates short sales.
Number one reason everybody hates short sales.
Yeah.
It takes so much time.
They take, who said, Sherry? Thank you, Sherry. They take so much time because they're long sales, right? That's what everybody calls them. They're not short, they're super long. They take 8 to 10 to 12 months. I need to talk to you guys about something that's really, really important, and this will save time at the end of the thing. This is another soapbox, but it's important, and this is what I go through. Marianne and I were working with different companies and different attorneys before we decided ultimately to start our own firm, our negotiation firm, right? The two things that kept happening that we were upset with. Thank you, Marianne. Two things that we were really upset with. Number one was a lack of communication from the attorney's office or the negotiator that we were working with. Number one, right? Couldn't get an update, didn't know what was going on, and it took freaking forever, right? 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, depending. And we're like, what's going on? Oh, no update. What's going on? What's going on? No update. Number two is that if there were people that were getting things done, they were more just like paper pushers. Like, okay, here's what the bank said. What would you like to do? And then it comes back, okay. And then they're like just an intermediary instead of actually understanding the process and actually trying to work it to help all parties involved. Like get the seller out with the least amount of pain and have the buyer still be okay with the sale and keeping things together with communication, right? That became like our focus and our passion with our own company. So I'm going to talk to you about what actually happens that makes this a long sale versus a short sale. And the truth of the matter is, depending on who you work with, as a short sale negotiator or an attorney's office or even a listing agent, some listing agents still negotiate their own short sales. I don't know why. They can make a hell of a lot more money if they just focused on prospecting, but that's just me. The dreaded thing that happens, we're going to call it the dreaded restart of the file, and you don't even know what's happening. Very quickly, I do this whole script about we have a wonderful lady named Melissa who works with us. Melissa from Short Sale Mitigation will take all the seller financials, right? All the assets and liabilities and income and expenses and the pay stubs and the hardship letters, and Marianne will go through that whole package in a few minutes. She takes all that data coupled with the buyer's offer, the buyer's pre-approval, the buyer's check, and all that stuff, puts it into one big package and sends it into the bank. And as Marianne said, usually we have to email, fax it, upload it to one online portal, and then sometimes a second online portal just for fun, for a second duplication time. And it all goes through there, and then finally she calls back 4 or 5 days later. Hi there, this is Melissa from Short Sale Mitigation, just calling to check in on 123 Main Street. I submitted all the paperwork. Do you know when we'll be assigned a negotiator? And the 800 number lady, who's entry level says, oh, yep, I see something came in, but you're missing pages 9, 24, and 63 of your package. Please resubmit. We're like, oh, well, I see them in between pages 8 and 10 and 23 and 25. Okay, that's okay. I'll send it all back into you. No problem. So then she re-emails, re-faxes, re-uploads to the 2 different portals and sends it all back in, right? This is the frustrating part. Then she calls back 3 days later. Hi there. This is Melissa from Short Sale Mitigation. Just calling to check in to see if you received the file, and we've received it back, and have you assigned a negotiator? Oh, yep, I see it, Melissa, and we'll send a negotiator. Give us about a week, and we'll have something back to you. Okay, so Melissa doesn't hear anything, and like 10 days later, she calls back in. Hi there, it's Melissa from Short Sale Mitigation, just calling to see if the negotiator signed from 123 Main Street. The package was submitted, and this and that. Yep, I see it's submitted. I'll transfer you over to the negotiator line right now. So she gets transferred, and a guy named Joe answers the phone. Hi, Melissa, this is Joe from, Bank of America, Bank X. Just call, I see the file in here, and I don't know really what to tell you. I've got a lot going on here. I've got a lot of files, so I don't know when I can't get to your file yet. So I don't know what to tell you, and I'll let you know. When we sign a BPO agent to it or an appraisal. That's the next step, right? It gets another evaluation appointment. Okay, so Melissa hangs up, and then she doesn't hear anything for like a week. So she calls back. Hi there, Melissa from Short Sale Mitigation. Just looking for Joe. Is Joe available? Okay, yep, here's Joe. Melissa, I don't know what to tell you. Like we've got 400 files on my desk. Your seller is like barely 2 months behind. I'm not going to even talk about your file right now. Like, you don't call me anymore. Melissa hears this and is like, oh, geez, I don't want to piss this guy off. Like, this is the guy who controls, how this file goes at the bank level. Like, I want to make friends with this guy. So Melissa does what he says, doesn't call back because she doesn't want to make him mad anymore. So she waits, and a week goes by, and then another 4 or 5 days. She's like, maybe, I want to call back because I don't want him to forget about me. So she calls back. Hi there, this is Melissa from Short Sale Mitigation calling on 123 Main Street, loan number 4444, and we're just looking to see if I can speak with Joe about this file. And they say, Joe, who's Joe? He doesn't work here anymore. Was that Joe in negotiations? Oh yeah, no, And you know what? It's the I see it on the file here. Not only does it not work anymore, no one called in on that file, so we restarted it. You have to resubmit everything, right? So here it is. Because no one followed up in 3 days, we restarted the file. So go ahead and resubmit all the paperwork and documentation. And what we don't see is brokers and agents, right? What we don't see is that when we hired this attorney or this short sale negotiator, they don't tell you or the buyer or the seller that that just happened. Instead, they don't want to make it look like they screwed up by a lack of follow-up and a lack of communication. So what do? They resubmit all the paperwork all over again, and it restarts another 3-week process before evaluation can get assigned. And the moment they stop responding to anything, even after evaluation is ordered, the moment they stop follow-up, the critical, we have a 72-hour strict follow-up policy in our office. Even the only way, even if people are super angry with us and they're starting to yell at Melissa, right? It doesn't matter because Melissa with a smile. Oh, I'm so sorry, Joe. We have an office policy. It's every 72 hours until you call the police or someone dies. I'm really sorry. It's like the only way to get through. So what you don't see is the negotiator attorney screwing up on the follow-up, which means it restarts and restarts and restarts, and then it turns into a 6 to 10 to 12 month sale. And then there's a real danger of a foreclosure, right? So I'm sorry I went through that whole soapbox, but that's important, and we just saved 2 slides later. I just went through it right now. And that's why the whole goal of a listing agent, when you're protecting your seller with a fiduciary duty, is to avoid a restart. Some ways to do that. Number 1, are the buyer's timelines reasonable when you're going through offers with your seller? If the buyer's offer has a finance contingency, is that good or bad on your short sale? Right? And I'm sorry, in the interest of time, I'm kind of just blowing through this, right? Now, we're going to get to the buyer's agency in a second, okay? But right now, we're only representing the seller. If there's a finance contingency, the short sale negotiator goes through the 90 days with the work of getting this approval generated, right? Or 120 days, whatever it might be, depending on who's backing the loan. There's an approval, but guess what? The finance contingency date ran out, and the buyer's like, we need our deposit back. We're out. Sorry. But, we're out for financing. What does that do to the seller? Right? What does that do to the seller? There are 3 things. I'm like all psyched up. I'm sorry, guys. I'm all energetic. I'm like just going for it. There are 3 things in an approval letter, right? 3 things in an approval letter. Number 1, the price, right? The bank will approve a price as to what they'll accept. Number 2, there's a timeline as to how long they will accept that price for, an expiration date on the short sale approval. Number 3, and this is what people don't know. Number 3 is the buyer's name that's listed on that short sale approval letter. So even when there's an approval generated and it's for Joe Smith buyer or Joe Smith Real Estate LLC as the buyer name on it, and Joe Smith now pulls out of that deal, what does that do to the approval letter? It kills it. And is it sometimes a fast track offer? Whenever you see on MLS or on Niren, approved short sale and it's active, no such thing. Maybe formerly approved short sale, but if it's active, that means the buyer's gone. That means there's no approval. That means they have to restart the process, go back through all of those steps, right? So you can feel free to, politely correct your fellow colleagues and say, is it an approved short sale? Because if so, we can close tomorrow. Typically, it's not. They'd have to go through the process again. I do go through all this because finance contingencies will restart the file if the buyer drops out. What about an inspection contingency? The buyer and the seller come together, submit the offer with all the financials to this negotiator. The negotiator submits everything to the bank, and then the buyer says, ooh, the inspection just showed me, $5,000 worth of stuff. I need to lower my offer by $5,000. What happens? Restarts the process. Restarts the process. So here's what we suggest if you're a listing agent and you're protecting your seller and you have a fiduciary duty to your seller to try to get this done and avoid the foreclosure. Number 1, you want as clean an offer as possible. Okay? Like clean offers, like no contingencies. The best closing date, closing time frame that you can have for your seller is a buyer that agrees to close within 30 days of primary lien holder approval. That's the best case scenario for your seller. If they have a closing time frame within 2 months, is it possible? Yes, sure, but it's not protecting your seller. If they have one in 3 to 4 months, is that doable? Sure, but doesn't protect your seller, right? The moment the short sale approval goes beyond that date, this buyer can walk, and then it restarts the file. And every time it restarts, it gets closer and closer and closer to eventually you can't stall a foreclosure anymore, and it goes to foreclosure there. So the other thing we're going to talk about is fees. Who is usually responsible? And again, I'm just kind of going through it. I like interaction, but like right now I'm super far behind, so I'm sorry. I'm just kind of spitting it all out. Who's normally responsible for, in Massachusetts, we have Title V's, right? Who's responsible for smoke certificate inspections and Title V inspections? Typically, it's the seller. Does the seller have any money in a short sale situation? Does the seller, typically no. Typically the seller does not want to pay any more money. Not only do they not want to pay any more money, they've emotionally checked out of the sale. And it's your job as a listing agent to kind of keep them engaged. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to help you through the situation. This is what I specialize in. This is where it's not just you. It's, by the way, you and 35% of the entire country are going through the same thing right now. And if we were back in 2008 and 9, it was 50% of the country. That's Mortgage Bankers Association statistic. 1 of every 2 homes was distressed in 2008 and 9. 35% of the whole rest of the country is going through the same thing that you're going through. We specialize in this, but I need you to stick with me. When the short sale negotiator asks you for bank statements or pay stubs, you got to give those as fast as possible, right? And I promise I'm going to do my best to help represent you and market this property and assist and be the intermediary and get you connected with the right professionals like a CPA and a bankruptcy attorney. And by the way, Marianne and I have all these people for you if you want your own team built in, realtors. So let us know. We're here to help you with this team and to help you through this process, but I need you to stick with it. Don't check out yet. Be with me on this process. So that's your job. And is it best if the buyers are going to have to take the fees for a septic inspection or a smoke certificate inspection or possible MLC certificates or water liens or anything that's there that the seller is not going to be able to afford? Is it better to disclose it now or later? Once the approval is generated and the buyer all of a sudden sees another $2,000 bill, they're like, I don't want to pay this. Because rule number 2 in real estate, Lori's heard all these rules all the time. Rule number 2 in real estate, when is it okay to give up your commission at the closing? It's never okay to give up your commission at the closing. That's rule number 2 in real estate. You never, ever, 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 ever agree to give up your commission to help make one of these sales work. Why? Because if everything is properly disclosed at the beginning, the buyer has figured everything into their offer price. They figured in all the fees. They figured in the discounts and what the property needs. They've already done an inspection, so they know what they can do and what they need to have happen for this property for it to work for them. And they figured it all into their offer. And they don't start with their highest offer. We'll get to that on the buyer side in a second. Let's see, what time is it? Holy jeepers. Actually, we're okay, I think. Did I speed through some stuff? I think I'm doing okay now, right, Marianne? I think I got through a bunch of stuff at the end, so we can just speed through that. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry that I just got all like hyped up. Is this a definite or possible short sale? So here's another way you're protecting your client. Amanda has walked through the house with her seller client that has called her because Amanda has sent all these wonderful postcards for the last 8 years to this condo complex because, you know, her broker said this is the best way to market and to farm this condo complex is just make sure you send them a postcard every single week and, you know, put new pictures on it and put new happy anniversaries and put new happy birthdays on it. And there it is. Amanda finally has her first call after 8 years of doing this. It's a great cost per lead. It's a, you know, okay, I'm kidding. Sorry, Amanda. Never mind. I guess it's not funny. So she has the seller call her. She's walking through with the seller. And she's going through and she sees all this deferred maintenance that's needed. Then Amanda has that conversation with this seller and says, listen, you know, based on what I'm seeing, and this is what I specialize in, and so it's okay, and know that I represent you and nobody else. Like, is there some things we can talk about here? And Sally, the seller, you know, admits to her, you know what, yeah, we've lost their job, you know, last week. And so now Amanda's job is to decide, okay, is this a short sale or is it not a short sale? And it's pretty easy when there's payoff letters on the table that are probably unopened, but normally there's not a payoff letter on the table, and obviously the seller doesn't want her to go through her mail anyway. So here's a question. These are easy questions, right? You guys can all just post in the chat. Seller, house is worth $350. Seller owes $275. Short sale or traditional sale? Short sale or traditional sale? What are we getting here for chat? We've got traditional. Anybody else? Keep going. Usually traditional. Traditional. Very good. Okay. House is worth $350. Seller owes $450. Traditional or short sale? Short. Okay, these are easy. House is worth $350. Seller owes $328. Short sale or traditional? Traditional. Depends. Short. Close to short. Possibly either. Yes, exactly. Okay, this is exactly what we wanted. So here's another question. Do you think that how you market the property will affect what kind of offers that you attract? So what if you put out, do you think that marketing a property with cute little and I get delicate on this too, because now we as realtors can't actually say anything in a description because it discriminates, right? So we can't even say cute little 3-bedroom, 2-bath home because I think that would discriminate against people who don't like bedrooms. So we can't do that anymore, right? I think that's the new rule, right? We can't say master, we can't say 3 bedrooms, we can't say house, right? So we have to just say like possible shelter. Like that's our description. That's a description that we can do. So but does it still affect you if you say possible shelter or a cute 3-bedroom, 2-bath Cape, in a quiet area of town versus short sale, subject to third-party approval, sold as is, right? Do you think that attracts different types of buyers? So maybe in the case of Sally, if she owes $328 and it's worth $350, it might be Amanda's to properly represent the seller. Maybe she wants to put this out as, you know what, Sally, for 14 days, why don't we do this? 14 days, we're going to put this out as a traditional sale. We'll see what kind of activity and action we get, offers, and what kind of buyers that we're getting in. But if in 14 days, I'll tell you right now, if we're not getting the offers that we want to get that are exceeding what you owe on this, I think the best course of action is we pull it offline and we put it back up as a short sale listing. So that way we at least make sure you get out of your situation. Fair? And Sally says, that sounds great, Amanda, but what about this letter? And she holds up an auction date for next week on Monday and gives it to Amanda. Now what do you do as an agent? What's the best fiduciary responsibility that you would now have to your client if there's an auction date set? Call the attorney, says Michael. Craig Nash, Money Pit. Tell them to call an attorney, call auction company. Yep. It is still possible for a foreclosure to be stalled, depending on the type, who's backing the loan, depending on a whole bunch of things, right? There's a bunch of them that are not even allowing a foreclosure to be stalled if it's within 37 days of the short sale, or the sale. But it is still possible. The number one thing that you should do right now is to market it to get an offer, any offer right now, because the bank's not going to stall a foreclosure without obtaining an offer. So you put it out there as a short sale, and you do your best to try to solicit an offer to then get the bank to work through it. So how best can I protect my client as a listing agent? Is there a need to bring in an offer quickly? We just talked about that. The buyers, if you have offers that have inspection contingencies or finance contingencies or any contingencies, that does not protect your client as a seller. So make sure you review that and say, well, there's a danger here that this could restart the file and that could get you one step closer to a foreclosure. So what I would suggest is we go back to these buyers and see if there's ways they can eliminate these contingencies. And if the buyers are, as we'll talk about, Sally and Joe that are top of their limit, FHA buyers that need a perfect home that's all broom swept and has no deferred maintenance in order for their loan to get approved, maybe they're not the best buyers for that short sale, right? Maybe they're not the best buyers for the short sales. And if you and the seller are going through it, again, highest versus best offers. The pricing here is what I'm trying to say is not necessarily the key factor. You're looking for clean offers that avoid the dreaded restart of the file. That's what we're looking for. And Marion will talk more about the BPO appointment later on in this presentation. So we talked about as is. Our properties, I'm going to skip this slide and just say, these properties are always left in beautifully broom swept condition, right? When the seller leaves, like it's all clean. They hired cleaners to come in, they vacuumed it up. So that's beautiful, right? So the buyers have no problem to, just move right in. Maybe you should remove that from the standard P&S agreements that are in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Property to be left in broom swept condition. Not. Okay. Seller ability to perform. I'm going to skip this slide now, but I want you to know that even at the end, when there is an approval generated of the property, the seller still has the right and the ability to say, yes, I'm going to sign the approval letter, or no, I'm not going to sign the approval letter, and everything dies. The deal dies, the approval dies, and it goes to foreclosure. Seller still has, you know, Sally and Joe Smith, you still have the full right, even after we've done all this work for 90 days, 120 days, or whatever, to then say, no, you still don't want to move forward. You have that power, Mr. Seller. No one wants that to happen, but sometimes it does. Apples and oranges. Let's talk about this. And this is worth your entire cost for this class. I know you guys paid what? Like usually people are paying like $1,400 for this class, right, Lori? Like this is solid stuff. I mean, everything you guys paid for this class, Marianne, everything you guys paid for this class is going to be totally worth it right now. I got it. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Okay.
You do it. No, I do it. No, you do it. No, I do it.
I got it. So here's the deal, and very, very quickly, just going to blow through it. You and your broker probably have your own in-house rules in regards to apples and what your office does and doesn't charge. I will say this: what you put into the co-broke in NIRN or MLS, that is a contractual obligation. So if the bank approves 6 apples and you put in 3 apples in the co-broke, right? How much are you paying out to that broker, to the other office? Just type in the chat. 3333. You put in 3 apples in the co-broke. Bank approves 4 apples. How much are you paying to that co-broke office? Keep going. Everybody just post in the chat. There it is. 3 again. Thank you. You put in 3 apples in the co-broke, and the bank approves 2 apples. How much are you paying to that co-broke? One more time, Amanda. Thank you. Or Love it. There we go. 2. Oh, interesting. Ooh. Okay. The bank approves 2 apples, and you have 3 in the co-broke field in NIRN or an MLS PIN. The answer is you are contractually obligated to pay 3 to that other co-broke firm. Just want you guys to be very, very aware and work with your broker or office managers on what the policy is, your office policy is. You can now put subject to third party, right? You can now say, you know, I forget the actual term, but, you know, splitting what the bank approves. You can say things like that now as language in there. But whatever you put in there as a number, you are contractually obligated to pay once that sale closes. So just be careful. Just be careful. Some people go, they're safe by saying low, but in the disclosures, they say if bank, whatever, you know, 50, whatever bank approves, you can do things. As long as it's in there and publicly disclosed, that is your contractual obligation. So be aware of that. And the number 2, is it possible that some of these lenders are not based here? Some of these lenders might be based on the West Coast. Some of these lenders are probably based in Germany or Denmark, right? And some of these lenders might not be aware of normal regional apples and oranges policies for when it comes to real estate. So are you negotiating your apples and oranges with the seller, or are you negotiating your apples and oranges with the lender or the third party, right? And all we will say is, as negotiators, why don't you start from a strong negotiation position, right? Just like the buyer is not going to come to us with their highest offer, they shouldn't, because the lender will counter them. Why don't you start in your listing agreements with a slightly higher apples and oranges that the negotiators can use to negotiate with the lender for your apples and oranges? Is it always going to work? No. Are you going to get that number? Most likely not. The bank will negotiate your apples and oranges too, unless it's one of those publicly guidelines that Marion went over earlier. That said, maybe you start with a lot more apples and oranges than you would normally start with in a listing agreement. That's all I'm saying for this course. All right, we'll go through that. Hopefully you guys.
Yes, commission is noted in the PNS. I'm just jumping in, but go ahead.
Yes, okay. Buyer agency, jeepers. All right, we're gonna try to do this really, really fast. We just talked about this a little bit on the seller side. Now we're gonna talk about buyer side. And I'm gonna reiterate here again. I know a few of you in this class are already very familiar with short sales on the buyer side. So I'm going to just not be delicate and just say this. You can absolutely buy a short sale for like a Joe and Sally Smith that are looking for their first time home and, you know, are so excited to be finally moving into the school system, and this is what they want, and, you know, they're going to be ready to, you know, start their families and all that. But every buyer needs to have their expectations set, right? Number 1, timeline has to be flexible on this. If Joe and Sally, you have an apartment and you're going to give notice to your apartment and now you need to move into someplace in 30 days or 45 days, that's probably not going to happen, right? Your lender, if you have rate locked and you've got 45 days to close on this thing and you can't afford another rate lock, or you don't know what's going to happen, or your lender says that we don't know what the market conditions or lending conditions are going to be like in 60 days. So I suggest you close on something in the next 60 days, which I know that's unfathomable to everybody in this class, but I see something coming here in 12 to 18 months that is going to be very different, but just as interesting as 2008, 9, and 10. Anyway, what if the lender says that to the buyer? We don't know if the lending conditions will allow us to close after 60 days. So you might need to close in 60 days. All of these things and lender situations, these have to be addressed with your buyer to know that, are they the right buyer for a short sale? Do not come in at your highest price, Joe and Sally, because the lender is going to counter you. They're not going to just accept your offer. They're certainly not going to accept your offer, so they're going to counter you. So don't go in at your highest. Make sure you read all the disclosures, or if there aren't as many disclosures, maybe the listing agent wasn't as knowledgeable when they listed the short sale, ask the listing agent and say, what should we be prepared to pay for before this closing, for this closing to happen? MLCs, septic inspections, like appraisals, different fee, water and sewer liens, like what should we know about that we can formulate into our offer so that we know we'd have to pay these to get this thing to close, so that we can push it into our offer price and lower our offer price accordingly. Inspections. Here's a part that I know is kind of contentious. Is it worth for a buyer to do a $450 or whatever the inspections are these days? I shouldn't have said that, but whatever they are. Is it worth for them to pay a few $100s for an inspection for a deal they might not even move forward on? Well, aren't they doing that anyway? They're doing that to renegotiate. So here's what we suggest as negotiators. We love inspection reports. We think they're the best thing in the world to justify and substantiate the offer, the regular offer that buyer has for that home. So take the offer coupled with their pre-approval or their proof of funds with a bank statement, and give the negotiators an inspection report, which is finally you have a purpose for that deal killer inspector that every one of your offices knows. I know every one of your offices has that deal killer that they're like, oh, geez, this guy was approved, doing this deal. This deal's not going to go. This deal's not going to go anywhere. Like, this is their purpose. This is perfect. Get the deal killer to completely rip apart this house, completely rip it apart, so they can go to the negotiator and it can substantiate that buyer's offer. Like, it's perfect. That $450 should save them a lot more than that when it ultimately comes time to buying that house. So inspections being done up front are better, or they're informational only, essentially, is what we would tell the buyers here. If they're a finance buyer, they're not buying cash, they're not an investor, have them ask for a 3% seller concession. Sometimes, you never know. Let the negotiators try to do their magic and try to get 3% of prepaids covered at the closing. And then be prepared to close when the approval is issued, right? So waiting. Approval generated. Everybody has 15 days to close. Go, 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 go. Is their lender ready to close in 15 days? Let's say the rate lock is now gone. Could their lender do it? Now, do they always have only 15 days? No. Sometimes they have 30. Sometimes they have 45. But let's say we've seen 15. So be prepared and prepare all your buyers for you have to have the right kind of buyers. And depending on who they are, the cleaner the offer is, the better. And they need to be aware of these things, and it won't be left in broom-swept condition at all. I'm not going to go through this timeline because I already did it. Normal short sales that have normal timelines. Oh, what happened?
All right. You know what? I just want to answer these questions.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So for the commission, just so everybody is aware that is actually in your listing agreement. Obviously, the physical amount of the commission is listed in the listing agreement. But yes, the broker and the selling agent and the listing agent and the buyer agent, they are outlined in the P&S. So the agents themselves and the brokerages are outlined in the P&S. Hopefully that helps. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Perfect. That's okay. Does anybody need any coffee, chocolate, sugar? Anybody? Who needs anything?
I need to pause for a second. Angela Harkin, can you hear me? If you can, we cannot see you and you have to turn your camera back on. Sorry, I've been trying to reach her via chat and I'm not getting anything. So I just want to make sure she's still there that we can account for her.
Thank you, Lori. I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, awesome. Her video actually is still turned on. She might just, it might be something over her camera, or her computer had a tech issue like mine did last time we did this class. So,
Right,
all
yeah. So send up a smoke signal, respond on chat, let us know you're there.
All right. And I apologize everybody for me being all hyped up. I do need another coffee, however. So, buyer agency, things to consider when making the offer. Who's doing the negotiations? I told you about Marianne's and my pains when we were hiring attorneys and negotiators to do negotiations for us. Here are some these are questions you have every right to ask. If it's a listing agent that's doing the negotiations, these are the three people that usually are negotiating on behalf of the seller, right? If it's a listing agent, are they knowledgeable enough? Have they the time to devote? I mean, what we have seen in the past, I'm sure there's listing agents that have this as a business and it's very powerful for them and they have a team built. But typically, as a business coach, I would ask you, what's your best dollar per hour ratio? Like, what is your one thing that you're supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis that makes your time valuable? So you have the right to ask, if you're the buyer's agent, these types of questions. If it's an attorney, okay, we've had attorneys that marketed themselves as short sale specialists, and those are the people who we used to use. But here are the questions that now we wish we had asked them. Do they have a full team or a staff involved that, as a full-time staff, that's all they're doing is contacting and following up with these banks and submitting paperwork? Do they have time for the 72-hour communication so that the dreaded file restart doesn't keep happening, which is what our experience was, right? A lot of attorneys like to say they can do it, and they can, but when it comes down to actually doing the work versus just prospecting for a new business, it gets very difficult unless they have a full-time staff that isn't also doing real estate conveyancing, isn't also doing criminal law. They're only doing short sales. Third-party mitigator, if it's a third-party company, what is their track record? And where are they operating, right? Massachusetts specifically and New Hampshire, they both have different laws that California and Florida don't have. So you have a right to ask those questions. And here are the best questions to ask. What can we help provide to make this process go smoother? What can we provide to help this process go any smoother? And how frequent can we expect an update on this file, right? We have an automated email system that updates all parties involved at a minimum once a week if we're just in our follow-up, 72-hour follow-up zone. If it's not, and the moment there's action on that file, there's updates and notes posted. And it gets mailed out, it gets emailed out to the appropriate parties. So that's us in a nutshell. I'm turning it back over to Marianne, who's going to go for it. And Marianne, I'm sorry, I left you only again with about 20 minutes. I apologize.
All right, I can fly through this. All right, because I feel like some of this is a repeat, but did we miss my favorite slide though? Hold on.
Yeah, you just went through it. I won't touch it again.
Wait, it says waiting for Nick to control your screen.
No, you're controlling it.
How are we way back here? Wait. Okay, this is the one. I'm just going to touch upon this one really quick, just so everybody is aware of it. NationStar, or sorry, Mr. Cooper, which was formerly NationStar, they have been doing this really interesting thing with their short sales. And what happens is you list your short sale, you do your job, you get a buyer, you seller, however long you market it, you bring that buyer in. It's kind of cool in the sense that, you've done all this work and then you submit it directly to Mr. Cooper. Mr. Cooper then turns around and says, we appreciate that you put through all this work to get a buyer and a seller and do the short sale, but we need you to we want you to put this property on our third-party auction site. And that's the way that we're going to determine the market value. So, I mean, the agents we were working with were outraged because they already had a buyer. So why would they put it up for auction for some other third-party buyer? So what they were doing was they're inserting themselves into not just your contract with your seller, they're now inserting themselves into the contract between the buyer and the seller, so twice. It's been an interesting one, but the way that we were able to address this is through NIRIN and through MLS. So we called NIRIN and asked, are we allowed to advertise a third-party auction site on one of our auctions if it's already under agreement. And of course, they flipped out and said no. And that if anybody's caught doing that, that, you know, they could get fined. And same with MLS, if you do work in Massachusetts, it is not allowed on either system. So if you get this paper from Mr. Cooper, just tell them it is not allowed in your state. You cannot have all these insertions to business you've already done. So we'll keep going. So steps for successful negotiation. How are you successful if you're going to do this job? You want to qualify the seller. We already went over that. Hardship, the motivation. We want to set the seller's expectation up front. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I need your paperwork. I'm going to need it in a timely manner. Otherwise, I can't do your sale effectively. I do what's called a soft title search. That's just where I'm looking up the title before I set the listing appointment, or before I go to the appointment, or before I meet with the seller. The soft title search is literally just me. I am not a title expert, which is why we always go to somebody like Lori to pull official title. Lien holder position, this is one I touched upon earlier, that determines who gets what in the payoffs. If you're in first position, you get most of the money. And it's the first position lien holder who says yay or nay to anybody underneath them, second mortgage, third mortgage, executions, what they can or cannot get out of the proceeds, and sometimes they can't get stuff out of the proceeds. You have to stay on top of your documentation. So as Nick said, follow up, follow up, follow up. So make sure that you have a good tracking system in some manner to follow up on your paperwork. You set your buyer and buyer's agent's expectations as well. If you have a buyer that puts an offer on the property that, you know, has to sell a house first, it's probably not going to work for you. If you have a buyer that wants to close in 30 days, probably not going to work for you. You're going to submit the complete application once you receive it and follow up all the time. And then, of course, obtain all contact information for all the parties to keep everybody updated on what you're doing. So I have a little sheet. I know who the buyer's agent is. I know who the buyer's attorney is. I know who the buyer is. I know who the buyer's lender is. If for some reason the seller's lender wants a copy of a good faith estimate because the seller's, because the buyer asked for a concession, let's say they asked for a 1 or 2% seller concession, I have to now prove that they are paying at least 1 or 2% of the gross sales price in, you know, in settlement costs. So now I'm going to go directly to the buyer's lender and try to get that information. I'm going to CC the buyer because it's the most direct route to get that piece of paper. So I like to have a piece of paper with the contact information of everybody in the transaction. Your application packet, these are the 10 most common things you will see in your short sale application packet. I'll go through these quickly. Seller's written authorization to speak to creditors. That's just something authorizing you to speak to everybody involved in the transaction. Otherwise, the seller's lender won't speak to you. Any lender required paperwork, such as arm's length transaction forms, affidavits, buyer certifications, and agent verifications. If you're working with a servicer like Bank of America, you want to call them because they have quite a few of their own forms they want you to fill out. So it's always worthwhile to call the servicer and say, hey, well, I'm about to start a short sale. What paperwork do I need from you? The purchase and sale agreement, of course, your proposed HUD-1 settlement statement or your certificate of disclosure. They do need a draft one. So you're going to need to know how to set that up, or find somebody that does know how to set it up. Because if you have an offer for $350,000 on a property in Derry, New Hampshire, the bank is going to want to know what they're getting out of that $350,000, and you do that obviously with your settlement statement or your draft CD. It's a draft until the end. And then your hardship letter, we've already gone over that. Financial disclosure forms, bank statements, your pay stubs. The financial disclosure forms usually, again, are provided by the bank themselves, or we have like kind of a generic one in our office. If you ever need one, you can call us. I'll give you a copy. Latest 2 years federal tax returns. This is like the whole thing. Don't skip a page. Get the whole thing and send it in to the lender. Your proof of, and again, these are all copies. Don't take originals of anything. Copies are fine. Proof of balance is due on anything outstanding. If you have other liens on title, credit card, whatever, you want to show that to the lender, especially if you're asking for that out of proceeds. $5,000 execution, $6,000 execution from a credit card judgment. Then what you want to do is maybe ask for $300 or $400 out of the proceeds to try to pay that off. Maybe you can't. You won't know until you get into the process, or unless it's Freddie or Fannie, who absolutely won't allow that. But they're going to want what the outstanding balance of that debt is, so you're going to probably send that into them. Listing agreement, showing you the property has been listed on your local NARIN or MLS. Buyer proof of funds or pre-approval, or good faith estimate if the buyer is wanting some type of seller credit. All right, let's see. Nick Aller, tell a contractor. Oh, he's writing. Thank you. Once package is submitted, so once you have all that information and you submit it to your lender, call in 24 hours to confirm the receipt. If they cannot confirm the receipt, call back in 48 hours to confirm the receipt. You 100% want to confirm the receipt of that package. Otherwise, you're going to be losing days, especially if they say they didn't get it. The lender has 30 days from the confirmation of the receipt to determine if all the paperwork is there and is in order. So once they confirm that they've received that paperwork, they have 30 days to determine and let you know if the package is complete. I can tell you from experience that doesn't happen a lot. So they are required by Consumer Protection Finance Bureau guidelines to tell you if the package is complete or not complete within that 30 days once they've confirmed receipt of the package. If you are not on top of this 30 days, like Nick said, it can very easily turn to 60 days or 90 days or 120 days. And sometimes it's under no control of your own. Like one of the agents said earlier, her sales got sold. We actually are working on right now that the servicer has changed, no word of a lie, 3 times. And it has really been challenging on this particular sale. So if you try to stay on top of your paperwork, though, it will go smoother. Be prepared for lenders to piecemeal the paperwork requests and changes. Very rarely do I get a lender that gives me 10 items and that's the only 10 items they're looking for or they need. They might give me the 10 items on the first week, and they may give me 4 items on the second week, and on the third week they give me something else. So, but it is important that you stay in communication with them, because the point of contact sometimes changes in the middle of the process. You may be working with a Chase short sale and start with 1 negotiator, and then 4 negotiators later at the end you have a whole different person, and a lot of times from point A to point Z they don't know what was done in between. And some lenders will order a BPO in the time frame, and some will wait for the complete package to be done. So keep that in mind. You're waiting for the value to be done on the property so that you can get a number. Some lenders may not allow that valuation to be ordered until your package is complete. Not all are like that. Some will order it up front. Some want the entire package done. So you have to kind of know who you're working with. The valuation. So once the packet is complete, the valuation is ordered. It could be a full-blown appraisal, and it could be an interior or even an exterior BPO. Exterior BPO is a drive-by BPO. For me, those are the hardest to combat, because usually that person who drove by through no fault of their own probably had no idea there were issues inside the property. They're kind of dealing with whatever they saw on the outside. So your value could come in very skewed because you know, they didn't know issues with the property. If you do get an interior BPO or a full-blown appraisal, you want to make sure you attend that appointment. It's very, 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 very important. I cannot stress that 100 times over. If you don't attend that appointment, then you are doing a disservice to the seller. But you want to be prepared with a packet of information ready to go for when the BPO agent or the valuation is going to the property. If the BPO is higher than the purchase price, the lender typically will reject the sale. But if you do prepare the BPO, you can do a BPO dispute packet. So let's say you didn't show up to the appointment, with a nice package ready to go on, you know, what you feel the value of the property is, or the supporting value for the buyer's offer price, you can do what's called the dispute package, which is very similar. Just be ready. There's things you're going to want you're going to want in the package ready for this person when they come. And you may have multiple, believe it or not, multiple BPOs, multiple valuations on a property, because these things sometimes only are good for so long. So Fannie and Freddie, it used to be 4 months. I think they're up to 6 months now. If they expire at 6 months, they order another one. FHA is 120 days. They'll order another one. And then, of course, if you have a second lien holder on the property, a second mortgage holder, they too can order a valuation on the property. So it's important that you're going to all these BPO appointments. So be ready for the valuation. Here's some do's and don'ts. So if you are ready for your valuation, you're going to put together your packet, and you're going to include things like location, condition, the repairs needed, the market history. You want fair market comps. They should include distressed sales if you are doing a distressed sale. You want to email the BPO agent or the valuation agent or the appraiser ahead of time this information. You're putting together a value support package that supports the buyer's offer price. And when you're supporting the buyer's offer price, it's much easier to get your short sale approved. You know, you're showing comps, repair assets, whatever else happens through that. You want this package ready to go, PDF, nice and neat, and you send it off to whoever you're about to meet. So if you're going to meet somebody at Friday at 4 o'clock, send that package off. Say, hey, I'm going to grab your email. I always confirm my appointment via email. And then when you do that, hey, I'm going to meet you 4 o'clock on Friday. Here's everything I know about the property. Here's every little thing that I know that may impact the value of the property. And this is why the buyer's offer is what it is. When you send that email, I suggest you ask for a real estate either license or appraiser license, however they're licensed, because we have had situations where people have sent in a picture taker. And I'll explain that in a bit too. If you get a drive-by and your value is a mess afterwards, ask the servicer to order an interior and note that it was a drive-by. When I'm saying, I can't see my slide, hold on. Don't allow non-agents into the property. That's the picture taker. So make sure they're licensed, and alert servicers of potential conflicts. Nick and I had a situation, it was in Derry, New Hampshire, where there was a BPO agent, I'm sorry, there was an REO agent. She did a ton of foreclosure properties, listed a ton of, she came up and she was the BPO agent for the short sale. And she says, hey, if this goes to foreclosure, I'll probably be the listing agent. So, you know, what point did, or what, you know, what is she going to actually bring my property in as a short sale listing agent where it needs to be? Or could she skew the numbers so it goes to foreclosure and she gets the listing? So again, be aware of who you're meeting. You just want to do a little bit of extra homework. The value dispute package, listing agent really should prepare it. It's going to include your cover page explaining, if you have to dispute it, cover page why you're challenging what the value of the property is. So this is if the value goes back to the property, back to the servicer, and it's wrong. Let's say it goes back to the servicer, it comes back in at $400,000. Your offer is $300,000 after you've done 6 months of marketing, and that's the best offer you could get. These are the steps you want to go through to challenge the bank's BPO. You want a cover letter explaining why you're challenging the BPO. You want updated comps. Why are you, what are the comps that support your $300,000 offer price? Repair estimates, pictures of the condition of the property, or anything that you know is wrong with the property that must be repaired. An inspection report, if there is one available. If the buyer did an inspection report, most buyer's agents want to work with you through the process. So ask them for a copy of the inspection report. Most will give it to you. Pictures of location, is it on a busy street? Is it near power lines? What's it around that affects the value of the property? And of course, your market history. The one thing I will say is if the seller has the ability to pay for an appraisal upfront before the bank does their valuation, many times that can help you with a BPO that may go awry. So now you're doing your negotiation. You're negotiating between multiple lien holders for payoffs and percentages. Usually you're doing this right at the submission of the package. Your goal is to get all lien holders to agree to all payoffs. So not everybody does. So you have to figure out what to do in that case. Remember, utilities may not be allowed out of proceeds, cities with water and sewer. Secondary liens sometimes, if they are non-mortgage, may not be allowed out of proceeds. HOA fees, I don't think we've talked about HOA fees yet, but those sometimes may not be included out of proceeds. Most of the time they will allow them, and most of the time you're gonna have to negotiate that number. So we've done sales where there were HOA fees, no word of a lie, that were $60,000. We had to negotiate an HOA amount that was acceptable for the lender to pay. So these are things you have to keep in mind. Nick already talked about broker commissions, and the mortgagee may award relocation funds to the seller. We already talked about that $3,000 that Freddie and Fannie might give you. And no, things cannot be deducted out of that $3,000 from Fannie and Freddie, but they can if it's the FHA sale. Non-mortgage liens include, but aren't limited to, executions, condo liens, mechanics, housing, welfare, conservation liens, IRS liens, Department of Revenue liens, and that's either Mass or New Hampshire. I need to change that slide. No, that would be Mass. So about HOAs. So find out up front if there's a condo association and what's owed. That's your first thing you have to do. Some lenders don't pay condo associations out of proceeds. Most do, but some don't. The condo association should be, open and negotiating about the money owed. I personally like to work with the HOA president, and that's just because if it goes to their attorney, if it goes to their creditor or their crediting attorney, they can be very tough to deal with. So I like to try to deal with the person that knows the person in the condo. And sometimes that emotional piece can help you with the negotiation. If you don't get a clean 6D certificate, you can't do the sale. And I usually try to settle for about 10% of the balance of the condo dues. You may need to go up to 20 or 30%. All right, let me see. I see some questions, so let me stop. BPO is assigned by the lender to do the could be an agent that's on the, yeah, you could be an agent on their list. Whoever answered that, like you might get $50 for the BPO evaluation. As a listing agent, I would be asking the seller to do pre-inspections to keep the home timeline shorter. Is there a way you can send me a slide in a larger format? Yes, I can, more than happy to send this presentation out afterwards. Rejection is likely when a purchase price doesn't align with the BPO price. Hold on, Nick and I are both waiting for this.
That's okay. We've got about 2 minutes left just to do a wrap up, and it's my fault again. So I apologize that I give you no time.
That's okay. I'm just trying. I need to move this little thing here. Okay. Buyer's offer is too low, or based on the financials for the seller aren't good. The seller's hardship is self-created. The seller has assets, loss mitigation, packet is incomplete, or the file is not frequently followed up upon. Do you have control again, Nick?
I do, if you want me to. Yep.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Short sale is approved on what is based in the lender's best interest. And then I'm just going to hand this over to Nick. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just to do a final wrap up here. So we already talked about what can happen at the closing, promissory note, cash at closing, right to pursue a deficiency judgment. And the only thing, this is all a lot of stuff that talks about, can you give your seller tax advice, right? The answer is no. We are a counselor, an emotional counselor only. In fact, we're not allowed to give any information. We can't even say what we like or don't like about houses anymore because we're going to violate some discrimination lawsuit. So all we can do is be there for them emotionally. That's our new positions here in real estate. But our point is, what our goal here today was we talked about fraud already. They can unwind the sale, and whoever wants to hear the story, we have an interesting story about a Cape Cod attorney that did a really bad thing. We'll talk about that later. Lighthouse doesn't do any of that, so you guys are all in better hands. But our goal today was not to overwhelm you, although a lot of people say this is it's overload, right? It's information overload. It's tough to put all of this into 2 hours because we literally taught you not only what short sales are and the introduction to it, we taught you how to do your own and negotiate your own if in the event that you wanted to either start your own company. But what I would say this is not an if, it's a when. A lot of you can disagree with me, but I mean, I know I'm right on this one. This is not an if, it's a when. It's a when this is going to happen, and you can be in the position to impact so many people, help as many sellers as you can, help buyers finally get into homes that they can finally afford as this market starts to shift. And if we did nothing else, if you choose to not negotiate your own sales and you want to hire an attorney, you want to hire a third party like us, this will give you the knowledge that you can now ask deeper questions to. You can probe and say, do you have a follow-up schedule? How frequently can we expect an update on this file? Is this a government-backed or a non-government-backed short sale? You can ask these questions, and you now know what they roughly mean, right? And these guidelines do constantly change. So, Marianne and the team are constantly updating the guidelines, and we're on the forefront and the battlegrounds every single day. Some of you said short sales went away, right? And to effect, the numbers, did they drop? They did. But you know what? They never went away. We've had this company since 2010. And there are short sales going all the time. And we've had some realtors only focus on short sales as they're 100% of their business, knowing that they can impact and have such a profound impact on someone's reset button on their new financial futures. So I wanted to thank you all for being here with us today. I hope there's an awful lot of info and value in this presentation. I wanted to thank Lori and Melissa for having us. And I will kick it back to Lori if you have any closing statements here. Anything else?
It's actually Jennifer, not Melissa.
I'm sorry, Jennifer.
No worries, no worries. So everybody, just thanks for joining. You can always stay tuned to our Facebook page for up to the minute, information about what's going on in the industry. First dibs on classes coming up. We'll be sending out Nick and Marianne's contact information. It's also on the handouts that you received already. And then after the class, we're just going to go back through and verify the affidavits. I'm going to send those off to Nick and Marianne for signatures, and then we'll be getting those out to you. But in the meantime, if you have any questions or need anything from us at all, don't hesitate to reach out. We would be happy to help you. So good stuff, guys.
Thanks for your time today, guys.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you. I don't mind staying for 5 minutes if anybody has a question.
Sure.
Nope. Okay. Yeah, the class.
I do.
All right. Someone does.
You can go if you want to, or you can listen in for the Q&A.
All right. Go ahead. What's your question?
So my question is, I've done a few offers with short sales, and I've actually never gotten them. They've never fruition for my client. So I keep asking this, is it possible to get a pre-inspection done if you're a listing agent on the property? The bank will cover or the seller will cover?
You can ask the seller to cover it, but here's the situation. If they're in a distressed financial situation, chances are they're not going to do that, and no, the bank will not pay for that. So that's why these properties are sold as is. Buyer is to do their own diligence.
Is it worth, because in New Hampshire, like way north, everything gets winterized.
Yep.
And most people don't move forward because they don't want to turn on anything because they know they have to prepare for a failed.
Right, right. So
I've walked into a couple that were kind of shut down decently, and it looked like, it might be a good deal, but you don't move forward with them because you just don't know.
Right. And so in those cases, usually it's on the buyer to get everything turned on, to get it inspected. You could run into that one short sale where a seller has some money and they may do that for you. Those are rare, but most of the time you know, it's buyer due diligence. And if that means turning on the electric and turning on the heat and turning things on to make sure everything's working properly, then.
So what if you, in the listing contract, you, like as a realtor, what if I paid for a pre-inspection of $300, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I put that into the contract with the bank for those proceeds. They won't even consider that?
Typically, no. Nope. The
Okay.
banks, yeah, it's because they don't know the property. They don't know what they're paying for. Typically, you won't see an inspection reimbursement to a seller at closing. You could try to just kind of jack your seller credit if you're a financed buyer. You know,
Yeah.
instead of a 1 to 2% of the sales price, you might ask for 3% and maybe get the kind of costs covered back that way. But I've never seen them pay for a line item that says, you know, inspection.
I have to say, like, I'd be willing to pay for it out of pocket in order to keep, you know, because it's like $350 in order to keep the timeline and not have any other issues. What are your thoughts on that?
Loban, first of all, I think that's an awesome question. And while there is, I call it rule number 2, it all depends on your clientele and your types of homes up there, right? Like if there's, is it very smart to try to number one, you'd have all the numbers and all the details up front ready for the buyer and buyer's agent, right? So it's all set to go. And number 2, it's fodder, it's ammunition for the negotiator to use to help support that offer, to help support that deal. So while I think it's a great move, depending, but it's a lost 350. You have to look at it that way. Like no one's going to get that back. The seller doesn't have it. The buyer typically they have the most reason to pay it, but a lot of times they're hesitant, like you know. So if you want to front it up front, and then I'm wondering, Mary Ann, just throwing this out there too, since this is the first time I've heard this question. What if she then asked the buyer or buyer agent to cover it as part of like a commission reimbursement or something at closing, or like?
I would never do that as an agent.
Yeah, I mean,
I would never provide it and ask. No, that's their own due diligence. And what if a buyer comes through that doesn't even care to do a home inspection? They're just going to rip it all apart. Then you waste money too.
Right. So for me, I think 300, this is my thinking behind it, and I could be totally crazy, and that's why I'm on this call.
No, that's good.
$350 inspection. And if it saves a month of time will be paid for by that $350. That's my thinking behind it. Like,
right.
What if you do the inspection and it comes back horrible? And then you have to disclose that to everyone. And
yeah, but then it's a negotiation piece that you can support a lower offer price. So, you know, in traditional real estate, you have to do an inspection, or most people usually choose to do an inspection. And if you find thousands of things wrong with the property, you back out, you still lose that fee.
Right.
The same thing on
they're gonna find it out anyway.
Yeah, only with a short sale, you can now use that as leverage to lower your offer price. Let's say you go in, you do the inspection, and the roof is bad. I'm down my way. A roof can cost $15,000, $20,000. You know, and you can now lower your offer price that amount. You have an inspection that states, hey, the roof is bad. So now you have leverage to renegotiate your purchase price, and then the bank will look at that, and because obviously we send those into the bank. Yeah, I personally think everybody should do it. I know it stinks to have to do it up front and not know what you're getting into, but unfortunately sometimes with short sales, that's what it is.
I actually think it's a great idea because unlike a traditional sale or an equitable sale, disclosure is key. And I mean, I think that it's short money to be able to expedite the process. I agree completely.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense.
So,
Great question. It's great feedback and discussion too, because yeah, it's both sides. And Sherry, to answer your question, you're absolutely right. If there's a pre-inspection done, that does have to be disclosed, but in a short sale situation, that's actually powerful. It's better to just over-disclose in a short sale situation. But you're right, for a conventional seller, that is at risk. That's a big risk to do up front.
So I have a question, if I could. I hands down will use you guys for every short sale negotiation. I do not make money sitting, making phone calls 50,000 times a day, tracking down documents, rescanning, sending over and over and over. So hands down, you guys will be, you're it. And I would recommend anybody else to use them too. I can't make money doing this, and when I can't be out in the field meeting people and taking listings. So I guess my question is that as you know, you guys are negotiating, but do you keep the agent in the loop through the process? And I know that you guys are collecting information, but do you kind of rely on the listing agent to collect information and continue to gather stuff if you can't get it from the seller? Like, say they're not cooperative, or do you just, like, how does that, what does that process look like?
That's a great question, because it happens all the time. So we try to have that conversation with the seller up front to say, and again, we want to be that funnel. So the seller is directly funneling the paperwork to us, whether it's through traditional mail, faxing, email, scanning, you know, however. We want to keep on top of the seller so that you're kind of out of that process again, so you don't have to worry about that. We have had situations, I have 2 or 3 agents we work with continually that want to control that process, that they collect the information from, and again, I'm not here to push an agent one way or another. If they want the control of that process, they can do that. It's not a big deal. And then, then each scenario is also different. We also have sellers that are elderly. So an elderly seller might not be able to scan a piece of paper and email it. So everything is either done by mail, and sometimes the agent doesn't want that, so they will take over that particular type of process. So we prefer to do it us to the seller, but there are obviously extenuating circumstances where that can't always happen, or it doesn't always happen, but we choose to do that first.
All right, what's your payoff? What do you guys get out of this?
So we are paid by the buyer. We are paid, we have 3 set tiers, I guess you could say, and it's based on the purchase price of the property. So anything $100,000 and under is $3,500. Anything from $100,000 up to $500,000 is $5,000, and anything over $500,000 is 1.5% of the purchase price. And that's brought to closing. I mean, I don't get paid. I always used to saying, I don't get paid unless you get paid. So if you don't get paid as an agent, I don't get paid as a negotiator.
So
Do you try to have, I'm sorry.
So no, go ahead.
Do you try to have it approved on the HUD before you charge the buyer for it?
Nope, we've been this way 10 years, always have the buyer pay. I don't ever work where I'm taking money out of the proceeds of the sale.
Yeah, the banks all changed their laws in 2013 to disallow that. So we moved on to this model. The bigger part of it is that, we have a huge buyer expectations package. We talked about all these buyer expectations and setting them. We've come up with a full packet of information that if you've ever seen a listing agent that's worked with us, right as an attachment in NIRN or an MLS PIN, you'll see like a 12-page document preparing the buyers and the buyer's agents for the short sale and what they can expect. Part of that is our fee, but it's also the part of that is how to substantiate and work our fee into the sale. Like, how so they...
Yeah, so if you have a $400,000 property and the fee is $5,000, the buyer's just gonna write their offer to the bank for $395 and bring 5 to closing.
Plus concessions, and plus the inspection tips that we give, and plus an appraisal tip that we give. We give a lot of tips to the buyers to really get their value, for that property, and to see our value too.
This may be a topic for another day, but can reverse mortgages be negotiated?
Yes.
Okay.
We love reverse mortgages.
Yeah, we do tons of them.
So how do you prepare the buyer for you guys? If I'm a listing agent on the property, how do I ensure you being part of the transaction?
Yeah, so it's pretty easy. You just make a little disclosure on NIRN, short sale, I guess short sale fee is involved in the sale, and some people either put it right in the description, or some people I've seen put it in the private remarks. And then we have our disclosure packet on the paperclip in NIRN, and there's a disclosure like you have to fill out this packet if you're placing an offer on the property. And then in that packet, we have a rider that mirrors the New Hampshire state sales contract. So
And Logan,
it
I
outlines
think, and if I'm not mistaken though, are you saying like you engage, you have a client that calls you or a prospective client that calls you? Is that what you're saying? Like as soon as they call you and you go to that listing appointment and you start to see those signs that we talked about, at that point you can just incorporate into your script saying, you know, as a professional, I specialize in, you know, in short sale situations, and I have a dedicated team and this is all they do. And, you know, once we, you know, work out our details today with our listing agreement and our strategy, the next step is I'll do an email introduction between you and, you know, the team, and they'll take it from there and go over all the Q&A with you and talk about paperwork and talk about how the process looks. But it's always our goal to make, like, we look like superstars, but we push everything to, you know, make the agents look like superstars. That's the whole point. We're a winning team here. And Lori too. I mean, it's all one huge team with title companies, the agents, and the negotiators working to get one deal closed. So just incorporate into a script and then just do an intro.
It seems like it would be easier. Again, I'm all about setting it up. I'm about the setup, right? So if you set it up for the listing appointment so that you don't have to touch it that much, it's worth it to me. If I have to touch this as much as I just heard you guys told me, it would not be worth me touching a short sale. It's way away from the, you know, 22 contracts I have in 30 days. I could never do it. But you see the fact that we cannot sustain like this, and there will be a short sale market in the next, we'll start to see it on November 2nd. But we'll see it full blown probably a year and a half from now. So
I would agree with that.
I just want to set it up that, you know, the offers like that they would have to utilize you guys from the beginning. And if I have a short sale buyer, which I don't have a lot of those, but I do have some that I can't make that phone call every 4 days.
Right.
Well, I can tell you personal experience when I was an agent, which I'm no longer an agent, but when I was licensed, my second deal ever was a short sale. And I knew nothing about it. And I knew nothing about the fact that there were these negotiation angels out there. And I wish I had, my goodness. I when you get down to it, I was literally probably made 30 cents an hour when the transaction finally closed. It was months of phone calls and doing and redoing. It was just crazy. And so well worth it. Well worth it.
Do you only work in New England or do you work in other states?
We've worked in Florida, Maine, and New York. We're open to other states depending on their laws. So yeah.
Every state, there's a couple states that need special licensure, and we're even trying to get licensed in those states, but depending on the volume, it is or isn't worth it. But we're happy to help. Sure.
Okay.
This has been so great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very
Have
nice.
a wonderful afternoon.
All right, guys. You too. If you
Bye.
have any questions, you know, email us. Let us know.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, thank you very much. We appreciate it.